So the Soviet Union of Great Britain has recently consulted with Canada, as Canada are looking to introduce the Online Safety Act, and they are beginning their investigations into whether the Online Safety Act would work in Canada. And to do so, they're holding meetings with various people from around the world, including people from the UK government, to figure out if the Online Safety Act would work in Canada. Now, in total, there's 60 odd hours of interviews, meetings and everything, but I want to take a 6-minute clip from James Bethel, who's an MP in the UK, talking about the effectiveness of the Online Safety Act, and we're going to just completely debunk it.
Important to get this kind of information about systems that have been put into place in countries that are similar to Canada, and sounds like from what you're both saying, working well, so that's very good to hear. So first of all, Lord Bethel, when you were talking, thank you very much for the important evidence that you provided about how it can be done. And
now the evidence provided shows what they've done so far, not if it works, and by their own admission, it's too early to tell. And during some earlier sections where he talks about the online content that people might be able to access, he describes it all as violent, non-consensual. He doesn't talk about the vast majority of adult content that most people consume.
And to just remind us that the goal is not perfection but harm reduction, and that this is what you said was a thoughtful and productive bill, and if not this bill, then what?
Home router blocking, parental controls on phones, educating parents to lead to better parenting. Just some options to throw out there.
And that the evidence of harm, as you've seen there, is overwhelming. And what I wanted to ask you a bit more about is this issue of the VPN potential bypassing, and what you were saying. If you can tell us a little bit more about how that has not been found, as in your experience thus far, to be a significant barrier in the UK.
Oof! Denial.
And you described one of the reasons why as it's a costly method to try to bypass. So if you can tell us a little bit more about that VPN issue.
Yes, I'll make 3 quick points if I may. Thank you very much. Firstly, this is contested territory. There are no accurate figures. The only figures come from the VPN industry itself.
Well, that's a lie, because we can see search traffic to VPNs from Google and many of the search engines. And we also have people like myself that work with VPNs and promote VPNs that can see how many times people click. And the search traffic for VPNs went absolutely catastrophically high at the end of July. And I know me saying this probably hurts our cause, but this just shows that the government's willing to deny facts and data to push their narrative. They're willing to tell Canadians that VPNs don't work and everything's safe and everything's going to be all good, when they know themselves it's an issue that they're struggling to reckon with, and it's been widely reported, not just the media but by the government themselves, that they don't know what to do with the VPN issue. But at least they're saying that it's not a problem. That might come back to bite them.
And I regard that as a tainted source. They are working in collaboration with big tech, big porn, in order to try to denigrate the effectiveness of the bill. So I take with a massive pinch of salt all the details and data that comes out of the VPN industry.
Okay, well, you're working with a government that wants to introduce digital identification and censor content online, so maybe we should take what you say with a pinch of salt too. Everyone has a bias and everyone has a narrative. Me too, I am not any different. But disregarding facts and data because it doesn't align with what you want to believe in, as an MP, is a very dangerous thing.
Secondly, installing and subscribing to and managing a VPN is technically quite tricky. It requires a credit card, unless you're going to have a very large amount of advertising, which is pretty obnoxious. And most children don't have a credit card, nor do they have £20, £30, dollars to pay for it. So the idea that the children of Britain are subscribing to VPNs against their parents' wishes is ludicrous.
Difficult, expensive. Well, private internet access is really easy to use. It's just a couple of clicks, but also on top of that, it's also really cost effective. It's actually about £1.40 a month, or $1.80 if you're in America land. And use my link down below. It's 4 months free and 86% off. And they also don't keep any logs. Right, admit it, that was the smoothest integration you've ever seen. Don't tell me otherwise, you're lying.
And thirdly, it's a wrong understanding of how porn gets into children's lives. The Children's Commissioner of Great Britain did a very large and substantial piece of work interviewing 300,000 children, so a massive study.
Right, so firstly, this 300,000 children study, well, it was to do with mental health. It wasn't to do with the Online Safety Act or internet protections. And from what I've gathered, there was only one little section in there about online safety. So when you're dealing with a set of people that are predisposed to harmful content online, your data is already a bit skewed. But then to add insult to injury on this, the other studies carried out by the Commission focused on people between the age of 16 to 21. Now, between the age of 16 to 21, you can have sex, you can go to war, you can drink, and you can even smoke. So when you're focusing a study around children, yet the majority of your subject audience aren't children, the data's already well off.
On how porn gets into their lives. It is not through search. It is not randy teenagers desperate to look at videos of abusive, violent sex.
Once again, abusive, violent. Why are you branding all adult content as this? You're trying to make it seem worse than it really is. It's bad, but it's not that.
It is mostly children being sent porn by bullies at school, by predators trying to lure them into conversation, or by the algorithm themselves.
Right, so if these studies were carried out of children, how likely is it that little Timmy is going to admit that he was searching for that sort of content? He's not. I know as a kid I wouldn't, but also nowhere in the Child Safety Commission's paperwork that they've issued out of the 4 studies that I can see that they've linked to, does it say how people found this content. Also, it doesn't say how the survey or study was carried out. Were these tick boxes? Did they give people options of how they found the content, or were people able to write their own responses? Throughout these segments with James Bethel, he repeatedly mentions how bullies are sending this content to children. I really struggle to believe that that is the biggest way that children are accessing this content. Also, age verification systems will not stop that. Like some kid from school texting you some picture of some chebs is not going to be stopped with the Online Safety Act.
And Senator, I've just got to tell you that if you subscribe on Twitter to Kim Kardashian, to Ronaldo the footballer, and to hip hop artists, you get a very different experience than if you subscribe to liberal politicians and TV journalists.
There's so many jokes I can make here, so let's just move on.
So the idea that VPNs in any way undermine the rules, I'm afraid to say, is wrong-headed.
And you know what? You can believe that. When you try and ban VPNs, we will circulate this clip online how VPNs aren't causing any damage to your cause. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing up, because I was going to ask you about Twitter and X, and how very glad to hear that in the UK, as you've said, they are complying. So if you can tell us a little bit more about that, because I've certainly, I, as a senator, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and I have to say that, the number of Instagram crazy, terrible messages that you get sent, and
well, yeah, you're in the public light trying to violate people's personal freedoms. Of course you're going to receive backlash from that. Not that it's excusable or acceptable in any way, but myself too, I receive hundreds of really angry and distressing messages all the time, but it's just the nature of being in the public light. The messages that 15-year-old Thomas from Ontario receives is not going to be the same messages that you receive. Also, you have your Twitter on screen throughout the whole of this presentation.
That's probably that, and just these Twitter things where you're constantly having to block these porn sites with bots and things like that they use to send that out.
Age verification doesn't stop that, point blank. The accounts that are just created to then spam people with like nude images and dodgy links, they appear and disappear too fast for X to do anything about it. Age verification is not going to prevent spam and bots in your DMs. It just doesn't. And if X or any of these other platforms had a way to tackle it that was effective, they would have done it ages ago, because it harms their user base and harms them as a platform. And it absolutely screws with their data as well. They don't want it either.
That does seem to be a very common thing. So if you can tell us a bit more about Twitter complying, and then if you happen to know anything about perhaps the meta experience of Instagram, because that seems to be also a common one. Thank you.
Yes. So the Children's Commissioner's report laid it very clearly at Twitter's door as being the main gateway to porn for children.
Cool. Parents shouldn't let their kids on Twitter. Problem solved. Let parents be parents.
We were very worried that Elon Musk would go ape, and that he would, like he did in Brazil, create a great fuss. I'm pleased to say that didn't happen. and that instead the platform has largely complied.
Because you threatened to ban the platform in the UK, we could put your exact words coming out of the mouth of Hitler or Stalin, and it would sound dystopian as fuck. Threatening to take away a platform's revenue and then talking about how it's good of them to comply is absolutely wild.
What we want is two internets, a safe internet for children and a fruity internet for adults.
So create a closed network for children that allows children to access a special sort of internet which is full of educational content for children's well-being. If you really want to be like China, which the UK government definitely do at the moment, China actually have a different version of TikTok for kids. What children see on TikTok is vastly different to what adults see, and that's nothing actually to do with age verification. They actually have a separate app for it. And if we're going to talk about having like a internet built for the children, leave the current internet where it is, don't touch that, don't interfere with our internet. Create a little separate closed network for children, which is heavily regulated and governed until people are of age to make their own decisions.
On Instagram, I'd say that the same remarks apply. Meta have in their lobbying and campaigning been ardent opponents of age verification. I find that very disappointing for a firm that has so much of the time of our children on its platform and purports to be a force for good in society.
Right. If Mark Zuckerberg thinks your approach to privacy sucks, you have bigger problems.
And I'm pleased to say that they have taken steps to try to reform their arrangements.
You must reform your thinking or you shall be removed. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed that. That was my debunk of this absolute absurdity. I'm going to keep following this and see what Canada does. I know that they've got loads more hearings coming up, and I'll keep my eyes on it and go through any wild stuff that happens. If you do want to get yourself an affordable VPN that's not complicated to set up, check out private internet access at the link down below. Get 4 months free and 86% off, and I shall see you all in the next video.